Okay. Hi. Hello. Let me just scooch on in here. Hello. Welcome once again to the Sharkstream Book Club. It's me, it's Gage. Hi, how are you? I hope you're doing well. Uh it is Thursday, June 22nd. And it turns out that sub imploded. Probably. So, I mean, you know, that happened. Anybody keep it up with current events. That's all I'll say on that. I don't know. The discussion of that is... Spoilers, please. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know if we can... I don't know if I can spoiler warning, like, real-time actually happening events. I feel like... maybe we're kind of beyond that. I'm not going... There's a lot of talk around surrounding, like, this whole thing with the Titanic sub right now. I'm not really going to super get into it, because I don't want to potentially get in trouble. But yeah, it's looking like that's probably what happened. What we are here to talk about today, though, is the Alan Wake novelization. We have 8 chapters left, including the epilogue. We're going to get through 4 of them today, and then we are going to run through the rest of them next week. And then after that, we will be starting in on the Alan Wake files, which is the, as I've mentioned, the little bonus hardcover book that came with the special edition of the game. I gotta tell you, special editions these days, they just aren't any fun. You know? Like, I mean, yeah, sure, you get, like, the occasional one that's got, like, a statue in it and stuff like that, but, like, I sometimes think about, like, some of the special editions that I really like, you know? Like, I really like the Alan Wake special edition. It has so much stuff. Like, these days, you'd be lucky to get, like, you know, some extra in-game items, maybe an art book if you're super lucky. But like, it just feels like a lot of them don't really have a whole lot going for them, which is unfortunate. Especially like these ones they got these days, where it's just like, oh yeah, you know, it's all of this merch and all this swag, and then you get a code for the game. It's just like, no, give me a physical fucking copy of the game. How are you gonna make me spend $120 fucking dollars and then give me a game code? Come on. But like, Alan Wake came with like a bonus disc with like a bunch of stuff on it. You could download developer commentary track for like in the game. This was back in like 2010, so like you had gamer picks and themes and stuff like that you could get off of it. They had like a DVD that had just like all of the, or this might have actually been on the same disc, but it had like all of like the previous like versions of the game, like early trailers showing off like versions of the game from like 5 years prior. Like it's cool shit. And then they give you a book. Like a hardcover book. And it's just like, hey, here's a bunch of cool stuff. You know, here's a bunch of cool in-universe story things for you to check out. You can have that. You can just have that as part of the package. You know what else had something like that? Halo Reach. So in Halo Reach, for the the legendary edition of that, like you got the Halo stuff was always like super cool. Like I got the legendary editions of 3, Reach, and 5. 5 was one where it's just like, oh, here's a code for the game. Games are generally lacking in terms of what you get. Like, sure, we live in the digital age, but I miss the small things like the game manuals inside the case. Yeah, you're not wrong. But yes, hello. Hi, Ion Agenda. Hi, Venomlad. I forget if I actually said hi to anybody. But, like, so Halo Reach, one of the major things is you, pick up Cortana from Dr. Halsey and deliver her to the Pillar of Autumn, right? So one of the things that you got in the Legendary Edition of Halo Reach is you got a physical version of Dr. Halsey's journal, which basically just talks about her, like, entire, like, journey from, like, before even, like, conceiving the Spartan 2 program, all the way up through, I want to say, probably the events of Reach. And, like, it's this neat little thing that you get. Like, I would say I might avoid reading any of the Halo novels just because, like, that's still very much kind of like a big thing for Microsoft right now. Give me 1 second. That's kind of a big thing for Microsoft right now, so, like, if I were to read that, they might come after me for over that. But, like, I feel like I could probably get away with maybe doing just like, hey, here's a Sharkstream book club of Dr. Halsey's journal from you know, the Legendary Edition of Halo Reach. That could be fun. I'm gonna have to keep that in mind. I do want to try and get back into, like, playing the Halo games. Right now, it's been difficult because, like, trying to play that with, like, internet connections between, like, the Xbox that's out in the living room where Natalie plays it and the Xbox that's in my room has been more difficult than anticipated. I might test out if I can do that with, like, LAN, like, just connecting our two consoles with a Ethernet cord. But that's something to look into at a later time. But yeah, I just, like, I feel like, I don't know that I've seen... I think the last special edition that I saw, that I was just like, I kind of want that, was maybe the Dead Space Remake special edition, with, like, the life-size Isaac Clarke helmet that you can fucking wear. Not like the... the helmet that came with the Legendary Edition of Halo 3, which was advised as being, like, the size of, like, a cat's head. It's actually bigger than that, but not big enough for, like, a person's head. Also, it's, like, got, like, a plastic molding on the inside so that it fits on top of, like, the actual case that holds, like, the game and everything. I've actually got that in my room here. Because I remember the Legendary Edition of Halo 3 also has some cool shit. God, I hope no fucking roaches have taken up residence in this thing. Let's take a look here. Oh, there's stuff in there. Out of here. I put, like, bug traps or something in my room. Jesus Christ. But yeah, the Halo 3 one I remember, like, had some cool shit in it as well, because, like, this was back when, like, Halo was huge, and there was, like, all sorts of, like, machinima series going on, like, all at the same time, so, God, what was it? The Halo 3 Special Edition came with, like, special machinima videos from, obviously, Red vs. Blue. And then I think also, God, there was one called This Spartan Life, I think. It also had, like, a fun little Flash game that you could load up. That was, like, a version... It was a minigame based on the Warthog jump video from Halo 1. Starring, oh god, there was a Halo webcomic back in, like, the mid-2000s that, like, was entirely pun-based in its humor. and I cannot for the life of me remember what it was called. I was I wasn't like huge into like the Halo community back in like the mid 2000s, but like, you know, it was, I was there. I was there present. I was in high school. So I was kind of like, you know, just kind of a weird kid. Anyway, um let's go ahead and let's start reading because we got a bit of legwork to do here. We're going to be reading 4 chapters today and then 4 chapters next week, and that's going to help us finish off the book. I will say the last 6 chapters or so, including the epilogue, basically covers the everything from like, it's like the last third of the game, and it's 6 chapters. Like, that really tells you like how aggressively they were cutting out like the chaff in the game, because like, I love Alan Wake. I love playing it. I think the gameplay segments are fantastic. But like, the last level of that game is just, it's basically just running from point A to point B, you know? Chapter 20. Move my mic closer to my face. I'm gonna make a gross noise real quick before I start. Alright, I'm good. Barry sat down beside Wake on the stage, blue spotlights playing across their tired faces. Heavy metal still boomed from the speakers, but the last of the fireworks had faded minutes ago. Still no sign of any more taken, the field deserted except for the crushed corn stalks and silent the silent stitch. Shutting down. Recalibrating. Silent scarecrows. Wake reloaded the shotgun anyway. Wake tried the flashlight again, but it was dead. Maybe there will be flesh? Flesh batteries? Flesh batteries. Maybe there will be flesh batteries. We're off to a good start. I haven't even finished the second paragraph. Maybe there will be fresh batteries in the farmhouse, he said, checking if the revolver was loaded. He offered it to Barry, but Barry shook his head. Al, we've been really lucky so far. Really lucky, said Barry, looking out towards where the stage lights didn't reach. Maybe it's time for us to call the sheriff. Oh, that's a great idea, mocked Wake. Except this kind of thing might be a little outside of the sheriff's job description. He stood up. I'm sure Breaker's is straight up police when it comes to a bar fight or a husband and wife going at it with the kitchen implements. But what with the Taken and the Dark Presence and Alice at the bottom of the lake, we might be asking her to accept a little too much on faith. He slapped his head. Oh, wait, I forgot. There's FBI agent Nightingale. He dug out the microcassette player he had taken from Hartman's office. Here's Nightingale at the front gate to the lodge asking Hartman about you. Me? Wake pressed a button on the player. Not buying that, said Nightingale, slurring his words. I was tailing Wheeler, and this is the only place he could have gone. That means Wake is probably there too. Agent Nightingale, this is private property, said Hartman, and I will not allow you to disturb my patients. Yeah? I can get a warrant. How would your fragile little patience like that? Oh, I'm thoroughly intimidated by your mighty authority now, Agent. Listen, you smug bastard. How would you like it if I busted through this gate and knocked you around a little? Agent Nightingale, first of all, I'm recording this conversation, so you might want to watch what you say. Secondly, you're not dealing with a hick now. I know the law, and if you can get a judge to grant a warrant, I'll be glad to cooperate. But you won't get one. Be advised that any further communications with me are to be made through my lawyer. Wake turned off the player. Somehow I don't think we want the steadfast and reliable Agent Nightingale rushing out here to help us. Last time I saw the guy, he tried to shoot me. Barry stood up, his nylon parka rustling. So, what do we do? He said, raising his voice to be heard over the music. What we started out to do, said Wake. We'll go to the Anderson brothers' house and look around for the message they left for me. Barry looked at the nearby farmhouse. Maybe there'll be fresh batteries in the cupboard or something. Great idea. Wake walked across the stage. Let's check the barn first. There might be a truck we can take after checking the house. Barry hurried to catch up. You know, Al, the old gods of Asgard, they were a pretty good band. You're not going to start playing air guitar again, are you? When we get out of this, said Barry, I don't want you mentioning that to anyone. Wake rocked out using the shotgun as a mock guitar. Very funny, said Barry. The barn was a large classic wooden structure that the Andersons had painted bright purple once upon a time. Now it had weathered so that it was the color of a fresh bruise. It took the two of them to swing the doors open, creaking on their rusted hinges. Wake fumbled around for a switch and was stunned when the lights came on. The Andersons must have a direct payment plan with the electric company and a fat bank account to cover it. No car in the barn, just a mess of sound and stage equipment, including a full-size Viking ship dangling by chains from the rafters. Wow, said Barry, staring up at the ship. These guys were really into this Viking crap, weren't they? He put a horned helmet on his head. What do you think? Très chic, said Wake. Barry explored the rest of the barn while Wake looked around the workshop. Plenty of power tools, which he wasn't interested in, but there were a couple of battery-powered lanterns that still worked. He picked up a blowtorch, shook it, still gasoline in the tank. He considered carrying it with them, but it was awkward and would only have been effective at close range. Wake remembered the three taken in coveralls that had rushed him on the stage, the one that had gotten close enough to hit him with a pipe wrench. It wasn't just the pain of the blow that Wake remembered, it was the cold, the utter soul-sucking emptiness that emanated from the Taken. No, Wake didn't want to kill Taken at close range again. Once was more than enough. Ow! Wake dropped the blowtorch, grabbed the shotgun. Come here, you gotta see this! It wasn't fear in Barry's voice, it was excitement. Wake walked over. What's up? Check this out, Barry said proudly. Wake stared at the complicated assemblage of copper tubing and glass bottles that surrounded a large copper tank. 50-pound sacks of corn were stacked haphazardly in the corner. It looked like rats had gotten into them. What is that thing? What is it? It's a still, said Barry. You're even more a city rat than I am. A still? Said Wake, moving closer. He touched one of the copper coils. To make whiskey? To make moonshine. Barry handed him a quart jar of clear liquid. Taste it. Wake shook his head. This stuff can be poison. Or that stuff specifically, it can be poison. Barry took a swallow. He grabbed his throat, rolled his eyes, started twitching, head jerking back and forth. Barry? Barry opened his eyes, laughing. He held out the mason jar. This is good stuff, Al. Wake took a swallow, gasped. It tastes like lighter fluid. See? I told you it was good. Wake passed him one of the lanterns. Let's go check out the house. Fine, but I'm bringing the white lightning. Barry took another swallow, then screwed the lid back on the jar. Top-grade musicians, top-grade moonshiners, those Anderson geezers are a national treasure, he said, following Wake out of the barn. Maybe you could ask the government to make room for them on Mount Rushmore, said Wake. There's no money in mountain tops. Barry unscrewed the lid and took a sip, sloshing moonshine down his hand as he walked. This thing's got reality show written all over it. I could sell the pitch in a heartbeat. He licked his wrist. Good to the last drop. The farmhouse was unlocked. Wake stood in the doorway, swiveled the flashlight beam across the living room, saw only furniture and a band poster half peeling off one wall. He turned on the lights. It's safe, he said, going inside. Of course it's safe, mumbled Barry. He turned on a floor lamp in the living room, then the lights of the kitchen and a light in the hallway. Why wouldn't it be safe? The living room was furnished with dated but high-quality furniture. A buttery brown leather sofa with a yellow cashmere afghan thrown across the back and white pine bookshelves. A cut crystal coffee table and an antique gold leaf mirror over the fireplace. The carpet on the hardwood floor was a pale gray Iranian weave. Wake had seen a similar one in a New York store for $30,000. At the time, the television was an old-fashioned tube. At the same time, the television was an old-fashioned tube model instead of a flat screen, and the stereo components didn't include an iPod hookup. A series of 8x10 color photos on one wall showed the Andersons performing at concerts around the world. The brothers strode the stage playing V-shaped guitars, wearing Viking helmets, fur vests, and thigh-high leather boots. One photo was taken at an outdoor stadium. The brothers bathed in red light, the crowd in the tens of thousands. Wake remembered the first time he saw them, the two brothers arguing a booth at the Oh Dear Diner. He remembered one of them, could have been either Thor or Odin, asking him to play Coconut on the jukebox. The simple delight on their faces when he slipped the quarter in the slot of the machine. I wish I could have done more for them. Nice place. Looks like it's been recently lived in, too, said Barry, pointing to the dishes on the counter in the kitchen. Guess the Andersons have a hall pass out of the nut house anytime they want. Wake turned on the light at the stairs, walked up to make sure they were alone. There were 3 small bedrooms upstairs. No taken, but no note from the Andersons either. He looked out the window. The generator beside the stage was still pumping out diesel smoke, the speaker still blasting out the best of the old gods, the field still empty, as though the crowd had gone home but the concert continued. Wake left all the lights on in the bedroom, then walked downstairs. "Did you find it?" said Barry. Wake shook his head, headed towards the kitchen. Barry turned on the radio, and Pat Maine's voice purred out. He sat down on the couch and screwed the jar of moonshine. "As you regular listeners know," said Maine, "I tend to work through the night, but I'm not the only one. Deputies Mulligan and Thornton are taking a couple of moments off their busy schedule to join me here in the studio. Boys, how busy are you now? Deerfest is almost here, isn't it? I bet that keeps you in business." "Hey, Al, let's take a drink every time somebody says Deerfest," called Barry. "It's been pretty busy, yeah," said Mulligan. "Actually, Pat, we've been real busy with other stuff," said Thornton. "Things which concern an ongoing investigation, so we can't talk about it," said Mulligan. "I wasn't gonna say anything. I was just saying that we've got, the irons to fry besides Deerfest," said Thornton. "Deerfest!" cheered Barry, taking a swallow from the jar of moonshine. "And how would you boys compare your workload to last year's?" said Maine. "Things have seemed relatively peaceful to me, but people do tend to get a little wild around Deerfest, don't they?" "Deerfest," said Barry, taking another drink. "It's crazy, Pat," said Thornton. "There's been all sorts of trouble this year. Vandalism, fighting, public disturbances, a lot of people missing, too." Wake looked on the kitchen counter and checked the drawers, but there was no sign of a note. He started a circuit of the living room, checking the desk, the fireplace, mantel. "Now, is it just me, or does Deerfest get wilder every year?" said Maine. "People seem to be more drunk, at least, and they start earlier and younger." "Then there's the Taken," chimed Barry, toasting the radio. "That always adds to the festivities." "Oh, it's definitely not just you, Pat," said Mulligan. "But what's weird is most of the trouble seems to be coming from middle-aged guys. People ought to know better, you know? The kids are doing fine this year." "Well, that's nice to hear," said Maine. "Boys, I want to thank you for stopping by. I'll let you get back to your patrol. Be careful out there." "Sure thing, Pat," said Mulligan. "Ditto," said Thornton. "Did you hear him?" Barry said to Wake. Said to Wake. "He said Deerfest 4 times." Wake stood in the middle of the living room. "No, he didn't." "4 times," insisted Barry, taking a drink. "You need to catch up, Al." "You have too big of a head start," said Wake. Barry stared at the jar of moonshine. "What do they put in this stuff?" "Packed with vitamins and minerals, I'm sure," said Wake. "No wonder I feel so good." Barry offered Wake the moonshine. "Here, take your vitamins. Don't want to get scurvy." Wake hesitated, then took a sip. He let it burn slowly down his throat, then took another sip. The second one didn't burn quite so badly. "I think you may be right." "Course I'm right," said Barry. Wake took another drink. "He definitely said Deerfest." 4 times, said Barry, giggling. Wake took a long swallow, held the jar high. 4 times. "Deerfest, Deerfest, Deerfest." Barry looked at Wake, eyes drooping. "Am I talking too loud?" "I really thought the note was going to be here," Wake said sadly. "Yeah," said Barry. "If you can't trust a couple of senile, burned-out rock stars, who can you trust?" Wake sat on the couch beside Barry, passed him the moonshine. Barry flicked on the television with the remote. The logo for the show Night Springs appeared, a spooky shot of a town at midnight, a full moon overhead. "Hey! Night Springs! Ah, that brings back memories. Hey, remember when I got you that gig? Your first real writing job." "I didn't even get a full writing credit," said Wake. "It was a start, though." "You got paid, didn't you?" said Barry, passing back the moonshine. "I got paid," said Wake. "You're welcome," said Barry. "Hey, is this one of your episodes?" The narrator announced the name of the episode. "No," said Wake. I think this one is, what's it called? What Dreams May Come? It's the one where the guy is wandering around. I'll talk about it in the recap. Too bad, said Barry, switching off the TV. I'll make sure you get your residuals. I'm not about to let one of my clients get screwed. Your clients? Said Wake. Clients, said Barry, enunciating carefully. Don't make fun of me, Al. You're at least 4 drinks behind. Wake took the jar of moonshine back, tilted it, and let clear liquid flow down his throat. I'm still scared, said Barry, looking straight ahead. Me too, said Wake. Glad to hear it, said Barry. I hate being the scaredy cat of the duo. The duo? Wake laughed. What are we, superheroes? I wish we were, said fucking shit, said Barry, slopping moonshine down his shirt. Superheroes got it made. They have to wear stupid costumes, though, said Wake. Tights, said Barry. You don't want to see me in tights. Cape, though. Bet I'd look good with a cape. Wake looked him over. I don't think so. Barry stood up, unsteady. He pulled the cashmere Afghan off the back of the sofa, tied it around his neck, and ran around the room, the Afghan fluttering behind him. I take it back, said Wake. You look great with a cape. Of course, I'm drunk, so you might have to get a second opinion. Barry staggered to the stereo, out of breath. Wouldn't matter if I was a superhero. Rather jump in a shark tank with a raw steak in my mouth than walk in the woods at night. He looked down at the turntable. Look, Al! A record. Real vinyl. Why would they tell me they left a note? Said Wake. Barry switched on the turntable, dropped the stylus onto the record. He sat back on the couch as the needle veered across the record, stopped halfway across, and stuck. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. Oh, that's catchy, said Wake, reaching for the moonshine. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. They say they left you a note, said Barry, head lolling on the back of the couch. They did, said Wake. Doing all these drunk voices is like causing me to become tired. In the car, Barry burped. In the car, you said they left you a message. What's the difference? Said Wake. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. Wake sat up, squeezed Barry's arm. You're a genius. About time you realized that. Barry took another drink, stared bleary-eyed at Wake. What exactly did I do? Wake pointed at the turntable. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. Okay, said Barry. I thought you didn't like their music. The lyrics, Barry. The Andersons are telling us to find the lady of the light. The lamp lady. Cynthia Weaver. She was in love with Thomas Zane. She knows about the dark presence and what it did to him. Maybe she can tell us how to defeat it. Barry nodded. I am a genius. We should go find her. Wake stood up, wobbled, and sat down hard. Maybe later. Wake's fall onto the couch set the stylus skipping forward where it caught again. Much later. And now to see your love set free, you will need the witch's cabin key. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. That's how you reshape destiny. Cynthia Weaver has the key to the cabin, said Wake. Oh, wait, hold on. I skipped a bit. Did you hear that? Said Wake. Daylight, said Barry. We should wait for daylight. Excuse me. And now to see your love set free, You will need the witch's cabin key. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. That's how you reshape destiny. Cynthia Weaver has the key to the cabin, said Wake. She knows how I can get Alice. The Andersons left us a message, just like they said. To the Andersons! Barry took another swallow of moonshine, passed the jar over. To the Andersons, agreed Wake. He took a drink, passed it back. Stay in the light, said Barry, passing the jar back. Wake took a drink. Stay in the light. And now to see your love set free, you will need the witch's cabin key. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. That's how you reshape destiny. Barry yawned. Kind of a catchy tune. It does kind of grow on you, said Wake. Barry took another drink. Wake took the jar back. I miss her, Wake said softly. I miss her so bad my stomach hurts. Badly, said Barry. I should have been better to her, said Wake. Not so angry all the time. I wish I was a rock star, said Barry. Must be so cool. I'm gonna make it up to her, said Wake. Things will be different. Probably too late for me to be a rock star. And with this body, who am I kidding? Wake stared at the turntable, watching the record go round and round. He didn't know how long he sat there staring, but it seemed like a very long time. Not that he was complaining. It was like riding a merry-go-round. With music. Al? Al? I'm right here. Al, next time, can I use the shotgun? I want to blast him. Sure, Barry, you can use the shotgun. You're a hero, Al. I wish she had video of you on stage, blasting away. I'm no hero, mumbled Wake. I'm a writer. Barry yawned. I need to take a little nap. Is that okay? No such thing as writer's block, said Wake, nodding to himself. I bet I could write 10 novels in a year. At least 10. And they'd all be bestsellers. Barry closed his eyes. You do that, bestseller. Keep watch while you're at it. Wake's chin dropped onto his chest. He opened his eyes. The record still went round and round on the turntable, the room safe and bright, and very safe. Barry snored next to him. I'll keep watch. No problem. Sighed Wake, closing his eyes again. Rose didn't know how the strange old lady got in her trailer, and she looked wrong somehow. The woman showed her teeth in an approximation of a smile and traced a finger down Rose's cheek. Pretty girl, she said. Rose felt as if she was falling asleep, but her knees didn't buckle. The crone spoke in a whisper, her words ice cold and dark in Rose's ear. Rose was lost in a dreamland where everything was drawn in black and gray crayons. The old lady had promised her that all her wishes would come true. She would be Alan Wake's muse. She was smiling so hard it hurt her face. She crushed a bottle full of sleeping pills into the coffee. Deep down inside, she was screaming in terror. I just got a call and a voicemail on my phone, so give me like 1 second before we head to the recap space. Alright, I'm back. It wasn't anything too important. Okay. So, we are currently post Children of the Elder Gods. So let's talk a little bit about what happened. So, we're closing in on the end of what is essentially episode 4 of the game, right? And this is basically so. Let me get my notes up here. 1 second. So in the game, this period of time would have been where essentially, like, everything between the stage to the fight with the Combine Harvester, right? Now, obviously, they moved that to sooner. I'm going to turn this down just a little bit more. Now, obviously, they moved the Harvester fight to a little bit earlier in the story. Mostly because, I personally, I kind of get it. In the game, like, it kind of makes sense to have more of, like, a steadier kind of gameplay denouement, where it's just like you still have some challenges to get through to get to the house, but, like, you know, the big thing of the chapter is done. In the book, though, it's just like the Children of the Elder Gods stage fight is kind of like the big event. Like, that's the climax of this part of the story. So once that's done, it's just like, okay, we're just going to make our way from here to, like, the end of things. So, Barry and Alan make the educated decision of getting fucking blasted. Like you do. I did my best to just kind of, like, steadily get them into, like, slurring their words and everything. I've never been drunk, so I don't really know what it feels like. I've known people who have gotten drunk. Gotten blackout drunk, even. But, like, in the game, they don't start, like, they notice, like, the still and everything, and, like, the moonshining operation and all that. And Barry starts talking about, like, getting a reality show going representing the brothers Anderson. Which, no, he still talks about here. But they start in on the moonshine, like, a lot sooner in the book. Which, I mean, isn't necessarily, like, given the sort of situation we find ourselves in, where it's just like, okay, the big thing of this section of the story has happened, and we just kind of need to ride the slope downward to the next big thing that, or towards, like, the end of the chapter, or the end of, like, this particular part of the story. Where it's like, okay, we have to fulfill the objective, and then we get the lore dump, right? So, I mean, like, I don't have, like, a problem with them, like, skipping over a bunch of, like, oh, what are they gonna do? Add in a bunch of stuff where it's just like, oh, Wake found a Taken, Wake blasted the Taken. Oh, Wake found another Taken, Wake blasted that other Taken. Alan and Barry get separated, and oh, here's some more Taken and some live power cables. Oopsie daisy. Shock and awe. We do unfortunately skip the part where you let loose the Viking ship to open up a door, which is unfortunate. Viking ship's still there, though. They do move around a couple things. There's a lot more of like Barry and Al drunkenly shooting the shit, just talking about like what the fuck ever. There's the bit with like the superheroes and the capes for whatever reason. Um, and of course, they don't really mention. It doesn't really come up that the moonshine's made with water from Cauldron Lake. So Alan's about to have some real trippy dreams. Let me tell you that much. Um, they do move the... So, in the game, they watch the Night Springs episode in the barn that has, like, the Viking ship in it, right? I gotta see if maybe I can find the name of that Night Springs episode. One second. Oh no, it's Dream of Dreams. So they have basically the same conversation as its opening, where it's just like Barry's talking about how Al's very first like writing credit was on an episode of Night Springs. And unfortunately, the game doesn't elaborate on what episodes Alan worked on. Personally, I like to think that Taken in his prime is one that Alan worked on, considering like how close the events shown in it are to the events, like the actual process of becoming a Taken. But the one that actually plays around this time that they discuss as like, oh hey, remember when I got you this as like your first writing gig? And then they're just like, oh, I wonder if this is one of your episodes, and it isn't. It's Dream of Dreams. Basic plot synopsis of Dream of Dreams is there's a guy wandering around his dream. He finds a long line of people. And he's just like, hey, what are we all standing around for? And the dude in front of him is just like, oh, you must be new. Well, you see that guy up there, he's the one who's dreaming all of this, and we need to make sure that he doesn't have anything that wakes him up, because if he wakes up, we all stop existing, and, like, I got a family and shit like that, you know? And, like, the guy's just like, I'm pretty sure I'm dreaming this, though? It's just like, huh, yeah, okay, buddy, sure. Now, Dream of Dreams does have a little bit of parallel to what's going on in the actual game. A lot of the Night Springs episodes do. You just kind of need to pay attention to them and get an idea and think to yourself, how does this kind of like parallel what could be going on right now? Like there's the one where the two old ladies find a hole in the basement. It's because the guy who's writing reality at the time hasn't figured out like what he wanted to put in the basement for them to find. Which, you know, obvious parallels there. Dream of Dreams, there is a mention that in the dream there is a guy dressed in like a scuba outfit. Kind of like how Thomas Zane shows up in like a big old bulky diver outfit whenever he shows up for Alan. But personally, I've always had canon that Taken in his prime, which is about a dude who applied for a job in the service industry, getting the free will beaten out of him so that he'll just be like an unquestioning worker ant. Interesting things to note about this, obviously the actual plot of it is similar to, you know, the idea of the process of somebody becoming a Taken. Especially if you take a look at the Bright Falls miniseries, and assume that that is like a person who is going through the process of becoming a Taken, and like the parallels are very obvious. At the end of Taken in his prime, the free will is pulled out of this guy's chest, and it's like this dark glob, right? It's like this dark black glob. It is set aflame with a match and explodes. Now, the reason that I tend to headcanon this one as one being written by Alan Wake is because if you think about what that's saying, how, like, people, in order to become Taken, are physically beaten down, and then their free will is forcibly removed from them, and the free will is like a dark black gloop of shit. Suddenly, all those, like, random patches of, like, oily, like, darkness that you find everywhere takes on a completely different meaning. And I like that. So Wake gets sad. Wake turns into a sad drunk because, like, ah, shit, bro, my wife's still missing. I'm sad. And it's just like, hey, man, I get it. My wife was in the hospital for 9 days and I went fucking stir crazy. Hated that shit. And then, of course, everybody just fucking passes out. Barry passes out. It's just like, hey, Wake, you stay up and you keep an eye out. And Wake's just like, yeah, sure. And then he fucking just conks out. We are going to beat your free will to death. Yeah, basically. And I mean, like, what could go wrong? You know, I will say this was always kind of like probably one of the funniest parts of Alan Wake, and one of those parts where it's just like, what the fuck are they doing? Where it's just like, these guys have just been through several, like, near-death experiences where they could have just been fucking obliterated, fucking beaten to death. And they decide, hey, you know what would be a good idea? It's still the middle of the night. There's still, like, dudes out there who I'm sure could completely fucking splatter our brains all over the walls. Let's get fucking wasted. This is a good idea. And then they both pass out. And it's just like, yeah, alright. We also get the radio show between Pat Maine, Mulligan, and Thornton, which is heard in the barn before you fight the Combine Harvester. Mulligan and Thornton, as I've said, are two mostly unseen characters. Thornton is completely unseen. Mulligan is present in the Bright Springs miniseries, in a brief role, where he misidentifies damage done by the main character to his hotel room as like a 12-point buck, I think. Did you know that, like, I think, if I remember right, the points, like, when people, like, grade, like, a buck by, like, points, what they mean is, like, the points of their antlers. Like, how many, like, points that their antlers have? I'm pretty sure. I think. Maybe. Don't quote me on this. Or do. I don't fucking care. But yeah. So, with that, let's go ahead and continue, because the next step is for these guys, Alan specifically, to just trip fucking balls on goddamn Cauldron Lake moonshine. Like I said, what could possibly go wrong? Chapter 21. Wake couldn't see a thing. Blind, drunk, hold on. Wake couldn't see a thing. Blind drunk, that's what he was. That was just part of it, though. He had been drunk before, plenty of times, too many times, but it wasn't like this. Never drink moonshine made by crazy people. That was the lesson here. But where was here? All he knew was that he was standing up and that he was so angry that his ears ached. He was always angry, it seemed like it anyway. He reached out to the smoky gray haze that surrounded him and felt nothing. The last thing he remembered was sitting on the couch with Barry, the two of them guzzling moonshine as a record skipped and skipped and skipped. Caught in the groove of an old LP was the Andersons' message to him, a song they had written years earlier, a song that pointed the way to get Alice back. The song had been a message from the Anderson brothers, but their homebrew had been a bonus, a ticket that took Wake back to a place he needed to go. Light flickered beyond the veil, and Wake could hear something now. A voice, faint but still. It was a woman's voice. Alice's voice. Alice! His voice sounded like a snarl, revealing not a trace of the relief and eagerness that he felt. In fact, his voice sounded exactly the opposite. Damn it, Alice, mind your own business. No, Wake hadn't said that. He couldn't have said that. But he had. The haze was thinning out. He could make out someone standing in front of him. Just leave me alone! It was his voice, but it wasn't what Wake wanted to say, and again he was aware of the rage boiling inside him, ready to explode. Alice looked up at him. I was just trying to help. Wake wanted to embrace her, hold her close, kiss her, but he couldn't move, couldn't control his arms or his words. I didn't ask for your help. Tears ran down Alice's cheeks, but she raised her face at him, defiant. That's your problem, not mine, Alan. Wake looked around. It was night, and they were upstairs in the study of the Bird-Leg cabin. It was their first night in Bright Falls. Over there, under the window, was the desk, Thomas Zane's desk, although Wake hadn't known it at the time. Wake's typewriter was on the desk, his old manual typewriter that Alice had secretly brought with her from New York. A surprise for him. Something to please him. The typewriter meant to encourage him to work in this new setting, this new place. Away from the pressures and temptations of the city. A fresh start. Not just for the work, a fresh start for them. Instead of pleasing him, the sight of the typewriter had enraged him. Wake's selfishness and arrogance had ruined everything, made him lash out at her, accusing her of trying to manipulate him. He remembered the sound of Alice crying out in the dark, and remembered running toward the cabin, trying to save her. He had failed that first night, but now he had a second chance. A chance to make things right, a chance to stop fighting with Alice and take her off the island. I'm tired of fighting with you, Alan. You have no idea what I have to deal with, barked Wake. You haven't got a goddamned clue. Then tell me, said Alice. Wake understood now. That wasn't him yelling at Alice. It was another Wake, the Alan Wake he had been before she disappeared. He was dreaming. He was a ghost in this world, a doppelganger, unable to speak or stop his former self, unable to warn him. Wake was trapped in the dream, forced to relive all his mistakes, but maybe, just maybe, he could follow the dream to its conclusion and find out what had really happened that night. Alice took his hands. Tell me, Alan, she said gently. I want to know what's bothering you. I want to help. For an instant, Wake actually felt her. Felt the warmth of her skin, and he squeezed her hands back, started to speak, to beg her forgiveness. But then the connection was gone. Broken. Wake was condemned to watch as his former self stormed down the stairs and into the darkness. He was carried along with his former self as though on a tether, carried along out the front door and down the long wooden bridge connecting the cabin to the mainland. He stopped at the moonlit footbridge and laughed at his own folly. Alice screamed, the sound shimmering like moonbeams on the lake. Wake's past self turned around just as the lights in the cabin went out, then ran back toward the cabin, running so hard that his feet cracked the worn planks. He ran faster, but it seemed as if the bridge was elongating in the moonlight, slats being added with every step, and the cabin receding farther and farther into the lake. Too late, Wake wanted to tell his past self. It was too late when you took the key from the woman in black, a key to a cabin that no longer existed. Alan, where are you? Wait, cried Wake's past self, and it was his own voice, the words impassioned his. I'm on my way. Stay inside. Fireflies flitted across the bridge, flashing a secret semaphore, distracting him as he raced for the cabin. Easy to lose his footing, and once he did, the lake was deep. Please, please don't, said Alice. Alice, I'm coming. Don't go. Don't go out onto the balcony! Too late. Too late. Too late. Stop! Shrieked Alice. Don't come any closer! Wake's past self stumbled but kept running. He jumped off the bridge and onto the island, Diver's Island, the ground strangely yielding underfoot. The feel of the place made Alan queasy, but he hurtled up the steps onto the porch and threw the front door open. Ow! Wake heard the sound of rotting wood breaking. Alice's scream echoed, then a splash. He ran up the stairs and out onto the balcony. Alice? The railing was broken. Alice? He stood there, staring into the lake, looking for her. A single firefly made lazy circles over the water, dipping amongst the stars reflected in the lake, and it was the saddest and loneliest thing that Wake had ever seen. Wake stood beside his past self as he looked closer. There. There was something in the water, a dark shape, sinking deeper and deeper. Wake dove into the lake, swimming down toward that dark shape that had to be Alice, but she sank faster than he could swim, and he lost her. Just as he had that first night. Wake felt himself floating slowly toward the surface. Diving after Alice was the last memory Wake had of that night. After that, the next thing he could remember was waking up behind the wheel of the crashed car, his head throbbing and wondering how he had gotten there. He had set out across the woods toward the light of the gas station in the distance, Stucky's gas station. It was on the way to the gas station that Wake had found the first manuscript page. Light-headed now, Wake struggled to reach the surface of the lake. He broke through, gasping, pulled himself onto the dock. He shivered under the stars. Even in his dream, he couldn't reach Alice, couldn't save her. He couldn't save anyone. The dock trembled, then rocked back and forth as a rumbling started deep underwater, the surface of the lake vibrating. Wake staggered up, walked unsteadily on the bridge back to the island, the wood planks groaning. Large bubbles rose from the depths of the lake, bubbles the size of beach balls, black and shiny in the moonlight. He collapsed as he reached the island, saw the woman in black on the balcony. Barbara Jagger watching him with eyes cold as the lake. Jagger, or the darkness that had worn her face, had been there every step of the way, at the diner, perhaps even earlier. She had orchestrated it from the beginning, and she was here now, watching Wake relive it. Jagger walked down the steps to where Wake lay. For a moment, her black veil slipped, the horror of her ravaged features on display before she covered herself again. She bent down beside him, and Wake smelled toadstools and rotting meat. "Look at the cabin," she whispered, pointing. "Is there someone in the window? Maybe it's your wife. Maybe your lovely Alice didn't drown after all. Maybe she's inside, alone in the dark." Shadows flickered over Wake's past self. "Hurry, you fool," hissed Jagger. "What are you waiting for?" Wake got to his feet. "Alice? Hurry!" Wake felt Jagger digging its nails into his flesh, felt it using him, pulling his strings. He knew all this, but he also knew that Alice needed him. He ran up the stairs to the cabin. Real quick, before we continue, so on our game footage that we've got running back here, when I was playing to get this footage, I discovered this conversation. I've never seen this conversation before. I've never triggered it at all prior to this particular playthrough, which I think is neat. I'm happy to have found it this time, you know? It was also very funny. Just like hearing like Barry just in the general store and then suddenly there's glass breaking. It's just like, wasn't me. Jagger smiled and followed him. It was dark inside the cabin, streaks of moonlight through the windows the only illumination. Wake looked around, worried. Jagger was right beside him. "Your lovely Alice must be here somewhere. Maybe she's upstairs, in the study. Yes, that's where she is. You can apologize to her for all the ugly things you said. You can tell her how sorry you are, how you'll never do it again. You'll laugh about it and put it all behind you." Wake saw shadows flickering on the walls, a deeper darkness that the moonlight couldn't reach. He rushed upstairs to the bedroom. She wasn't there. He walked slowly to the study, his footsteps heavy. If she wasn't here, then where was she? Alice? Jagger followed him. Wake looked around the study. "She's not here." Jagger glared at him from the shadows. "Did you really think there was going to be a happy ending?" Her laugh was like the sound of a rusted bed spring. "Your lovely Alice is dead. She drowned because you walked out on her. She's lying there in the filth at the bottom of the lake, making friends with the bloodworms and crabs. And it's your fault.
You're responsible for her dull eyes and cold blue lips. All she wanted was to help you right, but you wouldn't let her. You might as well have killed her yourself. It would have been kinder to the poor dear.
Wake's past self leaned against the desk, sobbing.
Hush now.
Jagger stroked his hair, and her touch was like seaweed.
There's still hope. Cauldron Lake is a very special place. Here, you have the power to change things. Alice wanted you to write, and that's the only way you can bring her back.
Shadows were piling up in the room, slowly blocking out the moonlight.
I can give Alice back to you just the way you remember her. Better, even. I'll help you. I'll tell you what to do. You can write her back. A creative fellow like you can do anything here. You're so lucky to be here. The story you write will come true, and all will be well again. Isn't that wonderful?
Wake felt the darkness gathering around his past self, and it took all his strength to remind himself that it was a dream, a memory that he was recovering in bits and pieces. The dark presence had brought him back to this place to torture him, but the darkness had miscalculated. Wake felt the pain and the overwhelming loss of that first night, just as the dark presence wanted. But he was able to stand back from himself again and finally understand what had really happened that night. This was how it had happened. This was how he had written the manuscript. Jagger had Alice, and the manuscript was the ransom for her. Wake saw his past self nod at Jagger. Yes, I'll write what you want. I'll fix it. I'll do anything you ask, as long as you bring her back. Wake saw himself sit down at the typewriter and start writing, fingers pounding the keys, the sound like thunder in the study. Wake remembered that sound. He had been hearing it for days now, the sound so constant that after a while he almost forgot it was there. Wake stared at himself banging away at the typewriter while Jagger hovered over him, and he remembered. In the dark, Wake had written for days, a week, written about almost a complete manuscript of a novel entitled Departure. Touched by the dark presence, trapped in a nightmare, he'd thought he was saving Alice, convinced it was the only way to bring her back. Jagger had stoked this fear, whispering to him as he worked, making sure that the unfolding story would make the dark presence more and more powerful. Wake watched as his past self worked in the darkness, barely sleeping, manuscript pages piling up on the desk. His past self slumped over the typewriter and Jagger prodded him with her bony fingers, urging him to write faster. Jagger cocked her head. Wake stopped breathing as Jagger scanned the room as though she was aware that someone was watching. The lake rumbled, the darkness stirring, stretching. And then Jagger was gone. Attending to other business, Wake's past self typing, oblivious. Through the window, Wake saw a light bloom in the night. He watched it slowly enter the cabin through the balcony. Yes, he remembered the light too. The diver, Thomas Zane, who had saved him after Wake hit the hitchhiker. He was aware now of the light moving upstairs toward the study, sensed it beside him now. I brought you the light to set you free, said the diver from inside the light. That's what you wanted. That's what I wrote, said Wake, putting more pieces of the puzzle together. Wake's past self had been compliant and desperate, but in spite of the cobwebs Jagger had put into his head, Wake had sensed the dark presence's plan. Even under Jagger's watchful eye, Wake had managed to write an escape hatch into the story, a light that had entered the cabin before he finished, a light that had freed him. Zane was weak and far away, but the light had interrupted the horror story, the terrible ending where darkness consumed everything and everyone. You have to go, Alan, said Zane. It will know that I'm here. Excuse me. The dark presence roared outside, beating against the windows. Wake awoke from behind the typewriter, and it wasn't his former self, the dreamer. Wake was there now, still groggy, still weak, but he knew. Zane reached out from the light and lifted the manuscript from the desk. It stole the skin of my Barbara a long time ago, he said. I knew it wasn't her, but I wanted so much to believe. The windows of the study went dark, turned to dust that floated onto the floor. Barbara Jagger stood there. You! Jagger shrieked at him. She strode toward Wake in a billow of black, wagging a finger in his face. Aren't you a clever boy? Her eyes were empty, bare sockets of bone, and Wake had to force himself not to look into them, or he would fall forever into the darkness, fall so far that no light could ever reach him. Such a strong mind, clucked Jagger, rubbing her hands together. So creative. I knew it the first time I sensed your presence.
Oh, we're going to have such fun together, you and I.
Get away from him, said Zane. Jagger glanced at Zane.
You're dead, Thomas. Did you forget?
The light flickered, held steady. You're not Barbara, said Zane. You never were. Jagger's black dress flapped around her as though she were in a storm. Get out of here, Alan, said Zane, trembling in the light.
Stay,
ordered Jagger.
You have work to do.
Wake stumbled down the stairs and out the door of the cabin. He looked back over his shoulder at the light in the study, saw the light in the study flare, then start to die. The lake was rising, breaking over the planks of the bridge on to the mainland as he splashed across. Out of breath, he jumped into the rental car, started it up, his hands shaking. The week in the cabin had taken its toll on Wake. Barely able to keep his eyes open, he floored the accelerator, gravel flying as he peeled off down the narrow road. He was driving too fast, outrunning his headlights, but he was afraid to slow down, afraid of what might be pursuing him. He dozed off for an instant, the car swerving onto the shoulder. He steered back onto the road. There was something else he needed to remember, something just beyond reach, something that was about to happen. His eyes were so heavy, too heavy to hold up. He thought of Thomas Zane. It must have cost him terribly to help Wake, must have thrown him even deeper into whatever nightmare he now haunted. But he had managed to weaken the dark presence and allowed Wake to escape that night. He jerked as the car veered off the road, crashing through the guardrail. He held on tight as the car bounced along the embankment, and, too late, Wake realized what he had been trying to remember. It was the accident, this accident, where everything had begun. In a few minutes, he'd come to in the wrecked car and have no idea of how... Wake's head banged against the steering wheel as the car slammed into a tree. Wake opened his eyes. He wasn't in the car, steam billowing from the radiator, his forehead bleeding. No night, no woods, no Stucky. The car crash had been days ago. He was in the Anderson brothers' living room, squinting in the soft morning light. Barry lay snoring on the floor, curled up on the carpet, the empty jar of moonshine beside him. Wake closed his eyes again, feeling sick as he remembered Bird Lake Cabin, Barbara Jagger, and Thomas Zane. It was no moonshine-filled dream. It was no moonshine-fueled dream. He wished it were. I wrote it, he mumbled. It's all my fault. You got that right, Wake. Wake looked up, saw a man with a gun standing over him. It's all your fault, said Agent Nightingale, and you're gonna pay for it. When he stopped the car at the Anderson farm, Walter felt relieved. Oblivion was close at hand. The brothers wouldn't miss a jar of moonshine or two in the booby hatch. But then he saw the man on the porch and knew who it was. Driving for his life and knowing it was useless, he didn't realize he was crying until he couldn't see the road for the tears. Okay, so. This is, of course, the big kind of like... It's hard to call it exposition. That's basically what it is. It's hey, you've played through 2/3 of the game so far. Here's what actually happened. Now that, like, the full mystery is coming into view, here's what's happening, here's what happened, and here's what you're going to have to do. So it's basically all stuff that we've already kind of, like, put together. Wake's missing a week because he was in Bird Lake Cabin, right? The dark pee-pee. No. Dark presence. The dark presence convinced Wake that Alice was dead. She's not. She's captured. She's being held hostage. But at the time, he didn't know that. He was too filled with grief over, like, what he thought was Alice's death and how he had acted to her prior to it, that when the dark presence was just like, oh yeah, she's super dead, man, he was, like, ready to believe it. which allowed him, excuse me, which allowed him to be manipulated into writing the manuscript. I need to eat like a snack or something. Give me a second. My tummy feels so empty. We're just going to take a quick break here while I eat snack before we continue. My like armrest is squeaking against one of the metal supports on my desk. It is kind of wild to think that, like, where we are right now in the novelization is what would be 2/3 of the way through the game. But we're, like, incredibly close to actually finishing the book. Like, one of the things that some novelizations of video games need to do, like, when they actually do them, is they need to, like, add in, like, additional stuff to the story. So that, you know, they can, fill in some of the space. Because otherwise, like, as I recall, The Flood, Halo's novelization, kind of had this issue where, like, there was a lot of points in the story where it was really just kind of describing what you do in the game, you know, dodging, throwing grenades, shooting shit, fighting enemies. So, like, for something like The Flood, they need to add in, like, additional content. Like, you learn about, like, the UNSC setting up their base on Halo and, like, the people who are in charge of that. You learn about everything Captain Keyes is going through. There's a whole subplot with Private Jenkins. That sort of thing. You learn about things from the Covenant side of the story. And they tend to be, I think, regarded as, like, the better parts of the story, simply because, like, it's new stuff. It's new, interesting perspectives on a story that you're already familiar with. But other times you get games where it's just like, you don't really need to do a lot of adding in. And in the case of something like Alan Wake, like, there's actually quite a bit you could probably afford to lose. So, like, all the major story beats are still hit, but, like, they don't have to, like, add in a whole lot of chaff. Another one that I can think of that's, like, they don't really have to add a whole lot to it in order to, like, properly write the novelization is probably Metal Gear Solid. Although the Metal Gear Solid book is actually a lot thinner than I would expect. There's part of me that wants to read that one day. I'm pretty sure I've taken, like, photos for thumbnails of it. I'm reasonably certain. Alright. 1 second. Drinking water with my snack because I'm trying to, along with the rest of the house, drink less soda. Gotta tell you though, hate the taste of water. Anyway. Now, one thing that the novelization does kind of show us is like this confrontation between Thomas Zane and Barbara Jagger, which is not something that is actually touched upon in the game. Like in the game, Zane helps Alan get out of Birdleg Cabin, and Alan isn't present for like the dark presence attacking Zane. In the novelization, instead, what we get is we get Jagger arriving prior to Alan being able to escape, and her and Zane having a back and forth. Which is a bit interesting, but it doesn't really amount to a whole lot. Like, it's not anything... I would argue that it's probably something that didn't need to be in there. Like, removing it would have removed, like, what, a page from this chapter, and, like, that's it. There isn't really a whole lot of, like, new information that we're given from it being there, but, I mean, it's neat that it's there. There's also this sort of, like, interesting implication that, like, the version of Alan that awakes in the cabin when Zane shows up isn't the Alan that wakes up in the car or the Alan that, like, dove in after Alice. It's the Alan right now, passed out drunk on the couch, taking over his body in the past. And what causes him to get knocked back to the future is getting in the car accident. And that's part of the reason why he doesn't remember anything, because, like, a different version of himself had taken over, had taken the wheel. If you'll pardon the pun. At least that's the implication that I'm getting from it. And then, of course, our chapter ends with Agent Nightingale finding Alan and Barry passed out in the Anderson farm and being like, oh, you motherfuckers are going to pay for what you've done. Now, one thing that I don't know what other manuscript pages were going to be shown between chapters between now and the end of the book. But one of the ones that you find, I believe, prior to this moment is Nightingale having entered the Andersons' house and having the drop on Alan and Barry and having a moment where he's just like, I could just kill them now. And then he doesn't. I think he calls him James Joyce in this scene. That's right, James Joyce. It's your fault and you're gonna pay for it. But yeah. So that's where that ends. So let's continue onward. Like I said, it's not really a whole lot that we need to, like, cover for this one, just because it's just we've kind of discussed all of this, like, piecemeal throughout the entire book. This is just kind of a very clear showing of, like, hey, this is exactly what happened. Right? Chapter 22. Wake gripped the bars of the Bright Falls jail and dreaded the coming of the night. It was dusk and he could hear the bustle on Main Street, car horns beeping happily, kids squealing, all the eager voices excited about Deerfest. They had no idea what was coming. Wake's knuckles whitened on the bars as he remembered Barbara Jagger's words that night, the cruel laugh as she sneered. Did you really think there was going to be a happy ending? The fact was that he had thought so. Wake was used to being in control, being in charge, being a winner. Of course he was going to defeat the darkness and get Alice back. He was going to make it up to her, renounce his past failings and start over. He was the writer. Of course they were going to live happily ever after. Isn't that the way the story went? Now, Wake beat his fist against the bars. Now he wasn't so sure. Barry stirred on the right-hand bunk of the cell, rolled over. His snoring echoed off the concrete floor and painted gray brick walls. Oh, wait, hold on. His snoring echoed off the concrete floor and painted gray brick walls. He'd awakened briefly when Agent Nightingale arrested them in the Anderson brothers' living room, bleary-eyed and brutally hungover. Barry had begged for a drink and then curled up in the back of Nightingale's car in his red parka like a gigantic tomato. He had awakened again when Nightingale dragged them into the station, but while Wake demanded to see an attorney, Barry had stumbled to the bunk and fallen asleep. Wake never got an attorney. Never got to see Sheriff Breaker either, who was out investigating the numerous disappearances in the last 24 hours. She should have asked Wake. Nightingale had confiscated the manuscript pages, had rifled in Wake's jacket, and found them before Wake woke up. In spite of the agent's gun, Wake had fought him for the pages, but he was still drunk on moonshine and Nightingale had tripped him, cuffed him almost before he hit the carpet. The humiliation burned, but the loss of the pages was worse. He had only read bits and pieces of the manuscript, bits and pieces of what he had gathered over the last few days. He had no idea what the final work would look like and what effect it might have on Bright Falls. Wake sat on one of the bunks. He could see the night gathering through the high barred windows of the cell. He could hear a car race down Main Street, desperate to get somewhere fast. A radio crackled over the intercom. Pat Maine giving his regular update on the upcoming festivities. Man never slept. Wake didn't blame him. "Well, we're expecting a record crowd from the neighboring counties," chirped Maine. "Naturally, we're hoping to break the record set by last year's Moose Fest in our neighboring town of Watery. Ladies and gentlemen, some people have asked me, what's the big deal about Deerfest? And I think this sums it up. It's about friendship and community. We've got a great party coming up, but let's try to hold it in until tomorrow and get through the night in one piece, huh?" Wake gasped as a sharp pain lanced through his head. He cradled his head in his hands, rocking back and forth. Worst hangover ever. He looked up as Cynthia Weaver appeared in his cell. Weaver seemed unaware of him, unaware of where she was. She stood slightly hunched over, a lit storm lantern in her hand. Wake blinked, unable to focus on her. Miss Weaver?" Weaver didn't respond, just kept glancing around furtively, her face in the light from the lantern. "I have it," she said, mumbling to herself. "Someone will come for it when the time is right. Oh, yes, they will. Thomas said so. He wrote it." She lifted the lamp higher. "The key is insurance. It's my job to keep it safe. Safe in the light. Always in the light." "Miss..." Wake looked around the cell, but Weaver was gone. He rubbed his temples, trying to relieve the pain. Barry stirred, slowly sat up in his bunk. My mouth tastes like a coal mine. Or a coal miner's boot." He looked at Wake. "Al, I need extra strength aspirin and an IV drip. Stat." He looked around. "We're in jail?" "Yeah, the Four Seasons was all booked up," said Wake. Why am I stuttering? Barry groaned. What did we do? Is it because we killed all those taken? We did do that, right? That was no..." He clutched at his stomach, staggered off the bunk, and loudly vomited into the toilet. Wake looked away. Barry fell to his knees and held onto the white porcelain with both hands. He vomited some more, then wiped his mouth with his sleeve. He flushed the toilet, wincing at the sound as he stood up unsteady. "I'm never drinking again." "Last night you wanted to market the Andersons' special formula moonshine," said Wake. "You talked about buying an ad at the Super Bowl." "I did?" Barry ran a hand through his scraggly hair and nodded. "Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time." "I need to talk to Weaver," said Wake. "She's the one in the song, the Lady of the Light." "I remember her," said Barry, plucking at his lower lip. "She walks around in the daylight carrying a lantern. I thought she was crazy." "She's probably the least crazy person in the whole town," said Wake. "Shh." He put up a hand. He could hear Nightingale and Breaker approaching in the hallway. They were arguing. "What kind of game are you playing, Nightingale?" said Breaker. "You can't arrest people without cause. You haven't even interviewed Wake." "I had some reading to do first, Sheriff," said Nightingale, talking too loudly. "And let me tell you, it was interesting stuff." Wake walked to the door of his cell, craned his neck. He could see them nearby, Nightingale waving the manuscript pages at the sheriff. "When the reports came over the wire last week, I knew, said Nightingale. "Flew out here the same day. Never thought I'd get a second chance." He sensed Wake watching him, stalked over to the cell. He was wearing the same rumpled black suit, and his tie was undone and spotted with coffee stains, his eyes puffy and bloodshot. Wake could smell the booze on his breath as Nightingale peered at him. "There's the one responsible for all the problems," he said, jabbing a finger at Wake. He shook the manuscript pages. "It's all here. All the evidence, including conspiracy to murder a federal agent. There's no way you're walking out of here. You hear me?" "Agent Nightingale, I intend to talk to your superior," said Breaker. Nightingale spun around to face Breaker. "Sure, why believe me? I didn't believe my partner either. Finn saved my life, saved it a couple times. When he started spouting all this mumbo-jumbo about dark rooms and dark shadows, I told him he needed a vacation." "I've already put in a formal request to the Bureau," said Breaker. "Your behavior is totally unprofessional." "That's funny, lady," Nightingale snickered. I said the exact same thing to Finn. Unprofessional. "You're an agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation," I told him. "You need..." Breaker put a hand on Nightingale's shoulder. "You're drunk, Agent Nightingale." Nightingale shrugged her hand away. "I never drank before Finn disappeared. Never." He dragged the back of his hand across his nose. "Neither did Finn. Never took a drop until he started talking crazy. Other agents used to call us the Righteous Brothers because we always ordered club soda after work. Then Finn started going on about the darkness, and I..." A deep rumbling shook the night, and the lights in the cell block flickered. Wake staggered against the bars, grabbing his head and moaning. "Al?" called Barry. Wake closed his eyes. He could see clearly now. Cauldron Lake, dead calm and black. The water hummed. He looked into the lake, saw the diver, Thomas Zane, falling into the depths. Zane had something in his hand. A light switch. The clicker. Wake's childhood shield from his own fear of the dark. What was Zane doing with it? In the dimness, Wake saw a bird-leg cabin, roots hanging from its bottom like the legs of a monster bird. Through the window of the cabin, Wake could see Alice and Barbara Jagger. Alice was struggling to break free. Hold on. Alice was struggling to break free, but Jagger's long nails dug into Alice's wrist. Alice became aware of Wake, screamed out his name, but all that emerged were black bubbles rising slowly toward the surface of the lake. "Al, you're scaring me, buddy," said Barry. "Mr. Wake? What's wrong?" said Breaker, shaking him. Wake looked up at her, still dazed. He had fallen to his knees, and Breaker was by his side. She looked concerned. He didn't blame her. The cell door was open. Nightingale remained outside, keeping his distance. It's a trick," said Nightingale. "Wake is up to something." The rumbling was louder this time, and deeper. The light bulbs in the hallway blew out in rapid succession, and Nightingale stood alone in the dark. The cell was faintly illuminated by streetlights from the outside. Breaker gently helped Wake up, her badge brushing against him. "I'm going to trust you, Wake." "Give me a break," said Nightingale. Wake held on to the sheriff's slim hand. "Wake stays behind bars where he can't do any more harm." Nightingale pointed his pistol at Wake. "Stand down, Nightingale. The only way Wake's walking out of here is over my dead..." Nightingale's eyes were wide in the dim light. "Wait a minute. I remember." He fumbled through the manuscript pages until he found one he wanted, the gun still aimed at Wake. Nightingale started reading out loud. Nightingale felt the situation veering out of his control, but the gun at least felt steady in his hands. He was ready to fire, resolved that he would let this happen over his dead body. Nightingale looked at Wake for a moment, glanced around the darkened hallway. And yet he hesitated. He had seen this moment before, read it in the pages of the manuscript. He was transfixed by the déjà vu and the horror that he was a character in a story. The page shook in his hand. A story that someone had written. Then the monstrous presence burst in behind him. The dark presence roared through the darkness, drowning out Nightingale's voice, deafening them all. It grabbed Nightingale, jerked him off his feet and down the hallway, bursting through the door to the outside and carrying him off into the night. The manuscript pages fluttered slowly to the floor. Wake, Barry, and Breaker stared at each other. Nightingale's abrupt, terrified scream already fading. Sarah was almost starting to relax. Maybe they could turn this into a win yet. Suddenly, there was a piercing sound, like guitar feedback, and Sarah thought of Barry Wheeler talking about him and Alan's on stage last night. He said they were like rock gods as they fought the Taken. Sarah's smile faded as hundreds of birds made out of shadows flapped out of the night, hundreds of ravens swarming into the rotor of the helicopter. The chopper bucked wildly, and the control panel lit up, telling her what she already knew. They were going down. Wheeler screamed next to her. She glanced over at Alan. He looked back at her, jaws clamped as he hung on. So a couple things to go over here real quick. First off, I neglected to mention that at the end of the previous chapter, we actually got a page for an event that is not depicted in the novelization. So, in the game, as I may have mentioned previously, when you go to the Anderson farm, one of the first things that you do is you find Walt Snyder. You see him driving his truck up to a house on top of like a hill overlooking the farmland. And then when you head inside, you hear him being attacked and firing off gunshots. And he's killed by the taken version of his friend Danny. Now, prior to watching that all happen, you do find a page that describes him getting to the Anderson farm with the intention of getting completely fucked up on moonshine. But it says in the page that he sees the taken Danny covered in shadows on the front porch, and he just fucking drives off. Now, because we never get a sense of what happened to him in the book, the most that we can assume is that he drove off and survived in the book retelling of events. But of course, in the game, he drives up to that house overlooking the farm and is killed. Now, this was a pretty short chapter. Basically just kind of covering Wake and Barry's time in the cell. Now, one can probably guess that booze made with water from a lake housing eldritch horrors probably gonna fuck you up real bad and give you the worst hangover possibly imaginable. I believe Barry describes it as feeling in the game. Barry describes it, I believe, as his tongue taking a crap in his mouth. And in the book, he says that his mouth tastes like a coal mine or a coal miner's boot. And then he just blows chunks. Wake has a hallucination of Cynthia Weaver while waiting for Breaker and Nightingale to show up. Basically being like, yo, I gotta keep this key safe. And I mean, like, they already knew at this point, like, it's weird. In the game, it's like, it's how do I put this? The game is structured like a TV show, a TV series, right? So the idea of starting off the new episode by reinforcing what was learned in the previous episode works just fine. So obviously, like, we know at the end of the previous episode, oh, we learned that Cynthia Weaver is the Lady of the Light in the song, and they need to find Cynthia Weaver. And then we have the extended reveal of what happened during the week that Wake can't remember, and then the episode ends. The next one starts up, and we get a reinforcement of, oh yeah, we need to find Cynthia Weaver. That's right. It's a little bit stranger in the book, where it's just like, hey, us learning about Cynthia Weaver was just 2 chapters ago. There isn't a clear delineation, there isn't a clear stylistic delineation between quote-unquote episodes. So it feels a little bit more awkward for them to suddenly be like, oh, right, yeah, we need to talk to Cynthia Weaver again. But it's there. So, you know. We get the confrontation between... Hold on one second. I got a text of just like, hey, you updated your account here. I'm just like, I haven't done anything of the sort. So, that's concerning. What was I talking about? Okay, so then we get the confrontation between Sarah Breaker and Agent Nightingale, right? And we actually get to dive in. The book gets to dive in a little bit more into Nightingale's background. In such a way that kind of like basically reinforces kind of what I had previously said about like why Nightingale is after Wake like this. So, according to what Nightingale talks about here, his partner's name was Finn, which I don't believe is a piece of information that is ever talked about in the game specifically, but I don't remember if it's talked about in the Alan Wake files. When we get there, we'll be able to find out. Um, and in the game, essentially what you're kind of left to sort of like put together yourself is that Nightingale's whole thing is that he started finding manuscript pages after blaming himself for so long for his partner getting killed, um, describing the death of his partner, describing his own death, describing literally everything that he's been doing. So it's kind of this idea of just like he's placed this blame on himself for so long, and now he has concrete evidence that it may not have actually been his fault and that it was actually another guy completely, and it was his fault. In this case, Wake's fault, because Wake is the one writing the story. And it's kind of sending him into sort of like a spiraling breakdown, basically, right? Um, in the book, we get a little bit more details about what's been going on. Um, there's this whole weird bit about them being called the Righteous Brothers because Nightingale and Finn would only ever order like club soda. Which, I mean, like, okay, first of all, who the fuck orders club soda? Disgusting. um, I'm not a fan of seltzer water. It doesn't taste good to me. Not even like flavored. Like the flavored stuff is almost worse because it's like seltzer water trying to be something it isn't. Basically. What was I saying? Uh, So there's that really weird bit, but then Nightingale starts talking about how Finn was talking about, like, dark rooms and darkness and blah, 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 blah. And then he specifically says that Finn disappeared. His partner didn't die, specifically. He disappeared. Now, again, I don't remember if this is exactly what happens in the game, necessarily. I don't think there's any manuscript page in the game that covers this, specifically. I could go back and look. I've got all of them on the Xbox 360 version, so, like, I could go back and, like, find out. But I don't know for sure. Am I in a part in the game that I'm playing right now that I could, like, stop at and, like, maybe go check that? Hold on. I was playing Fear Files, like, all today. Hold on 1 second. We have a situation. Did you know? Am I going the right direction? Oh, yeah, I am. 1 second. 1 second. Let me see if I can just book it to an autosave. Saving checkpoint. Okay. So I think I should still have the Xbox 360 version of Alan Wake installed. Yeah, I do. But yeah, I mean, like, this is all interesting stuff. I can't say for certain if it's all just made up for the novelization, unfortunately, because I simply don't know. It could be. Potentially. This could be... It could be, like... Something that happens with, like, movie novelizations a lot is that for the movie novelizations, because they need to get started on them basically as soon as possible, a lot of times they end up getting earlier scripts that will include scenes and lines not present in the final version of the story. I think there's at least one situation where, like, as a result, this ended up with, like, a book version of a movie being considered better than the film because it's using an earlier version of the script that's just considered better. Alright, so let's see. We can't find anything about... Here's Nightingale's arrival. No, nothing in that one. Nightingale fires at Wake. Nope. Ransom? Nightingale on the radio station? No. Sarah distrusts Nightingale? No. Oh, one of the other important things to note here. Did I spell that right? Hold on. Now, this is something that was actually 100% like confirmed, I think, in Control, but in Alan Wake is more or less like implied. The way that Nightingale like throws around his authority, flashes his badge, and like any sort of like challenge against him, just like, you can take it up with my superiors. Only for like right before his death, Sarah to be like, I want to talk to your superior, and he's just like, listen, that's not possible right now. The implication seems to be that Nightingale has been let go from the FBI. And he's not here in any official capacity. He is here as a loose cannon cop on the edge, hard drinker who doesn't play by the rules. Nightingale and the Majestic. Hold on. No. Oh, episode 3 is the one where like you find the Wake finds a page, manuscript page, and that one's my favorite, honestly. Nightingale arrests Wake. Nope. Hartman, Mulligan, Nightingale finds the manuscript. No. Nightingale reads the manuscript. No. Nightingale attacked by the Dark Presence. So this one was also very interesting. So in the game, when Nightingale is just like, wait, I know this, he doesn't have a chance to really look at the page in question before he's dragged out into the night. But in the book, um, in like what is genuinely a really good like moment of tension, um, before they get the chance to, they get the chance to like drag him off into the night. Um, he does like get to read the events up to his death, quote unquote death. Poet and the Muse lyrics, Children of the Elder God lyrics. Yeah, no, nothing in here about Nightingale's past or anything. You know what? I'm gonna be right back, actually. Give me one moment. All right, I'm back. Hold on one second. Gotta turn the music down. I tell you, ADHD is a hell of a thing to have. Like, I go out to grab one thing from the living room, and I very nearly get distracted by the fact that Natalie's out there watching Mamma Mia. All right, let's see here. So let me. So I have with me right now. We're not going. Obviously, we're going to be reading this on its own, but I've got the Alan Wake files in my hands right now, and I am going to just check here real quick to see if there is anything that is written about Nightingale's past. doesn't seem like it. Oh, hold on. Oh, yeah, no. Finn is mentioned. Ah, yeah, here we go. Lost partner in the line of duty has been confirmed. Circumstances around that loss remain murky. So, it is entirely possible that the version of events that seem to be described in the novelization may be taken from, like, specific notes about Nightingale's past provided to the author by Remedy in order to essentially fill out the book. Ooh. Ooh. Alright. So, with that, let's go ahead. Hold on, I got it. Alright. Let's go ahead and read our final chapter for today. I gotta say, Alan Wake's Files feels dense compared to, like, the novelization. The novelization's a paperback, though. Alan Wake Files is hardcover. You know? Chapter 23. Oh my god, Sheriff Breaker said in the sudden silence. What the hell just happened? Wake watched the last manuscript page drift onto the floor, a snowflake in the darkness of the jail hallway. The heavy door that had blown open when the dark presence snatched away Nightingale now bounced back and forth in the wind like a rusty gate. What was that thing? Said Breaker. We need some lights, said Wake, picking up the rest of the pages. The roaring sound shook the building. A fire engine raced down the street outside, siren wailing. Hold on, I'm just adjusting my sitting position. A big light, stammered Barry. A big light. I've got flashlights in my office, said Breaker. I've got all your things in there too, Mr. Wake. Alan, said Wake. It's Alan. To my friends. I'm Sarah, said Breaker. I'm Barry, remember me? He followed the two of them down the corridor, glancing behind them in the darkness. The door banged. Hey, wait up! Wake heard shouting from the outside as they walked down the hallway to Breaker's office. It was a distinctive sound, one he understood only too well, the quavering voice of someone being attacked by a neighbor, a friend, a co-worker, and asking why, what had they done? He saw Breaker hesitate, start to go outside and do her duty, but he put a hand on her shoulder, slowly shook his head. Even in the dim light, he could see her eyes, saw the acknowledgement of their situation, her inability to help in the face of what they were confronting. Trash cans and metal news boxes tumbled down the street, their papers blast apart by the darkness. Headlines dying in the night. With a whoosh, the storm of shadows carried everything straight up in the air, wooden picnic tables and metal signs promising saws sharpened expertly for 20% off. Even the parking meters in front of the post office rattled violently on the curb, then launched themselves into the night, trailing concrete and rebar. Wake and Breaker were thrown against the wall, and Barry was knocked off his feet as the fire engine landed in the middle of the street, dropped from a great height, its tires exploding, the windshield melting down the hood, the shadows so thick on the vehicle that there was no way to see what color it was. It was the color of darkness now, that's all that mattered. Wake stared at the fire engine as the siren started screaming again, undulating in triumph, and he thought of the car that Alice had spotted that first day as they drove to the cabin, a convertible sitting in the middle of the woods with a splintered tree driven up through the undercarriage and the ragtop. He and Alice had circled the car, trying to figure out how it could have possibly gotten there. They would have been better off to have driven out of Bright Falls at that moment, tossing the keys to the cabin out the window as they passed the Oh Dear Diner and just kept going. Alan! Breaker stood in front of her office. Are you coming? Wake tore himself from the fire engine, the siren sound reverberating in his skull. Breaker tried the light switch in her office. Nothing. She went to her desk, tossed Wake a flashlight, and rummaged around for others for Barry and one for herself. Oh, gods. Oh, fuck, excuse me. Wake pointed his flashlight at the ceiling, the reflected light softly illuminating the room. Barry pointed his light directly at his own face, hoping to stay safe in the spotlight. Breaker opened the cabinet on the other side of the room. Breaker handed Wake the shotgun and revolver that Nightingale had taken from him in the Anderson farmhouse. Well, now are you going to tell me exactly what's going on in my jurisdiction? Wake took a deep breath. The thing that swept Nightingale away. It's an entity of some kind, something powerful that lives under the lake. It's called the Dark Presence. The Dark Presence. Wake expected her to mock him, but her tone of voice indicated that she took his statement at face value. He nodded. It uses darkness somehow. It takes over people, things, uses them. The townsfolk covered in shadows, they're called Taken. The darkness protects them, so they can't be hurt by guns or shotguns or anything else unless you burn away the darkness with light. That why you wanted the flashlights? Said Breaker. With them and the guns, we can protect ourselves. You should have seen us last night, Sarah, said Barry, blinking in the beam from his own flashlight. Me and Al totally owned the stage at the Anderson farm. I was shooting off fireworks and manning stage lights while Al blasted them to bits. We were like rock gods. The sheriff turned to Wake. Rock gods? She had a pretty smile. Wake blushed. You had to be there. Barry strummed air guitar with the hand holding the flashlight, the beam shooting across the room, glinting off the badge pinned to the sheriff's chest. The siren of the fire engine went silent. Breaker went to her desk and took a small notebook out of a locked drawer. Wheeler, I need your help. I'm your man, Barry grinned. Breaker handed him the notebook. I need you to call the names on this list while I check the fuse box and see if I can get the power back on. Call those numbers and tell them that you have a message from me. Night Springs, okay? They'll know what to do. Night Springs? Like the TV show? Barry checked the list. Who's Frank Breaker? He related to you? My father, said Breaker, walking out the door. Hey, is this like a secret society? Called Barry, but Breaker was already gone. Wow, that is one take charge lady. For the next 5 minutes, Barry called the names on the list and gave them the message. Night Springs. Most of the time he had to repeat it, but no one argued. No one lingered on the phone either. No luck, said Breaker, hurrying into the office. The fuse box is totally fried. I need to find Cynthia Weaver, Wake said to Breaker. She can help me stop the Dark Presence. Wheeler, did you make contact with everyone on the list? Said Breaker. Everyone, said Barry. I like the whole code word thing. The fuck. I like the whole code word thing, Sheriff. Mucho mysterious. Breaker picked up the box of shells from the desk, started loading her shotgun. What do you think Miss Weaver is going to do for you, Alan? Wake shrugged. I have no idea. The Anderson brothers left us a message in one of their songs, explained Barry. They said the lamp lady had the answer. Breaker raised an eyebrow at Wake, then resumed sliding shells into the side of the shotgun. I know what this sounds like, started Wake, but the only time my father ever got really mad at me was when I was 10 years old, said Breaker, and he heard a rhyme I made up about Miss Weaver. Weaver, Weaver, loony believer, scared that the dark is gonna eat her. My father sat me down, furious, said Miss Weaver paid attention, which was more than most people in Bright Falls did. Even more importantly, she tried telling people what she knew. It wasn't her fault that most folks didn't want to hear it. She finished loading the shotgun, racked the slide, the sound echoing. That was good enough for me. So if you say Miss Weaver knows how to defeat the Dark Presence, it seems to me we need to get to her as soon as... One of Breaker's squad cars tumbled end over end across the street, crashed into the side of the sheriff's department. A scrap of ceiling panel floated down onto them. Miss Weaver lives in the old power plant, said Breaker, as though nothing had happened. She's been living there for years. Illegal occupancy, but no one's ever complained, and even if they had... She flicked her badge with a forefinger. My father used to say that half of law enforcement was knowing when to apply the law and when to apply common sense. She carried the shotgun easily in one hand, the barrel pointing toward the floor. We'll take the rescue helicopter and see what Miss Weaver has to say. You know how to fly? Said Barry. How hard can it be? Said Wake. That's not funny, Al, said Barry. You do know, though, right, Sheriff? Breaker and Wake headed out the door, and Barry hurried after them. Downtown Bright Falls was a disaster, a combination of Mardi Gras revelry and an EF2-level tornado. Crashed cars, broken glass, and trash everywhere, a geyser of water spewing from a knocked-over fire hydrant. The Deerfest banner drooped almost to ground level. One end of Main Street was blocked by an overturned logging truck, logs strewn like pickup sticks. The other end closed off by a Deerfest parade float that stretched from sidewalk to sidewalk. Across the street from the police station, sparks showered from a major power outlet that had been hit by a car sizzling on the wet pavement. This way, beckoned Breaker, edging along a nearby storefront. There's an alley past the bookstore. We can cut through and get to the helicopter. The three of them scuttled down the alley, the wind kicking up newspapers and bits of trash around them. They emerged cautiously from the alley. Most of the storefronts were lit on this street. As they crossed over toward the dim lights of the Oh Dear Diner, the roaring of the Dark Presence started up again, increasing in intensity with every step they took. A pickup truck with a camper shell on the back hurtled toward the corner, the pickup thick with shadows. Excuse me. Heading right toward them. Barry stayed in the middle of the street, frozen in place, until Wake jerked him toward the diner. The pickup missed them by inches and slammed into a parked car. The crushed radiator bubbled and steamed. The Taken stepped out of the pickup's billowing vapor, a muscular man wearing an I Survived Deerfest t-shirt and jeans. He hitched himself toward Breaker, his movements jerky, a carpenter's tool belt slung over one shoulder, a claw hammer in his hand. "Home repairs done cheap," he intoned. "Tom?" Breaker raised a shotgun, pointed it directly at the Taken. "Tom Egan, you put down the hammer right now!" "Clogged drains," the Taken kept coming, hefting the hammer. "Leaky roof." "Tom, listen to me," ordered Breaker. "Tom!" The Taken swung with the hammer, just missed her as she backed up. Wake caught the Taken in his flashlight beam, and the hammer trembled in its hand as the shadow slid away. He shot it with his shotgun, shot it one-handed, the kickback almost jerking the weapon free. The Taken dissolved in the blast. Breaker stared at the spot the Taken had been. That was Tom Egan. He fixed my Fort Prunch? Fort Prunch? What the fuck? He fixed my front porch not 3 weeks ago. Lousy carpenter, but that wasn't Tom anymore, Wake said quietly. Sheriff? Sarah? That wasn't Tom. Breaker nodded. I know. The roaring sound grew louder. Barry peered into the diner. Rose's life-size Alan Wake cutout was near the door, backlit by the warm red glow from the soft drink dispensers and the jukebox. It's safe in there! The door to the diner gaped, sprung from the frame, the lock broken. Barry pushed it open as the roaring came closer and went inside. Come on! Breaker and Wake slipped inside the diner after him, crouching down as a dump truck rumbled down the street, 4 Taken in the back, all of them carrying axes and chainsaws. They peered over the sides of the truck, looking for someone. Looking for them. Wake and Breaker and Barry eased to the floor, watching as the truck slowly drove past. They may come back, whispered Barry. What did you mean before? Breaker said to Wake, lying beside him on the floor. When? Said Wake. You said it's called the Dark Presence. They're called Taken. Breaker's eyes reflected the red light from the jukebox. Who named them? Wake shifted, cleared his throat. I think I did. Breaker cocked her head. A lot of what's been happening around Bright Falls, it's because of me. Wake pulled the manuscript out of his jacket. He explained his dream, his vision from the farmhouse. He told her everything he knew, told her how the Dark Presence had stolen Alice, used her to get to Wake to write the manuscript of departure, making him tell a story that would give it more and more power. Your writing did all of this? Said Breaker. He's a really great writer, chimed Barry. Hold on. He's a really great writer, chimed in Barry. It's a gift. Barry, you're my best friend, said Wake, but please shut up about my gift. All those people taken. Breaker looked at Wake. Maybe when you get Alice back, maybe you can write things back to the way they were. I don't know if it works like that, said Wake. What happened to Rose? Said Breaker. She's not covered in shadows like Tom Egan. She's not a Taken, but she hasn't been right since we found her at the trailer. What happened to Rose is the same thing that I think happened to Cynthia Weaver, said Wake. Rose and Weaver weren't taken. They were only touched by the Dark Presence. Because it got more for them... Because it got more... Wait, hold on. Touched by the Dark Presence, because it got more for them that way. It needed Rose to lure Barry and me to the trailer. It needed Weaver... He looked up at the cardboard cutout of himself, a perfect likeness only flat and empty. He shook his head. The Dark Presence touched me too. After Alice and I arrived in Bright Falls. I'm like losing it a little bit. I'm getting a bit lightheaded. Something they don't tell you about talking a lot is it means breathing a lot. And breathing a lot can mean... oh god, I had water slide down the wrong pipe. Can mean getting lightheaded. And I got hiccups now. Great. Breaker looked concerned, tightened her grip on the shotgun. It's all right, said Wake. I'm still me, for the time being. God, fuck. 1 second. Alright, I can either have hiccups or I can be choking on water. I can't have both. That's gonna be a problem if I have both. Oh, God, I still fucking... God damn it. God. Alright. Can I, like, finish now? Thank you. The Dark Presence. Did it touch you during this week you can't remember? Said Breaker. It needed me to write the manuscript. That's why it kept me alive, said Wake. I'm the one it wants. I'm the one who keeps the wheel spinning. The sooner I'm gone, the sooner this town will get back to normal. Get down! Hissed Barry. The dump truck slowly drove down the street, the plate glass windows of every storefront that it passed blowing out, glass tinkling through the night. The three of them covered their heads as the windows of the diner exploded. Wake peeked his head up, saw the dump truck continuing down the street. We should get to the helicopter while we still can. We can go out the back door of the diner, said Breaker. The helicopter pad is close. They made their way cautiously through the restaurant. Barry lifted the clear plastic container, grabbed a jelly donut. Don't give me that look, said Barry, chewing with his mouth open. I haven't eaten all day, and my blood sugar... Oh, forget it. He took another donut, stuffed it in his pocket, then scooted after them. As he crossed the diner, he slipped on the broken glass scattered across the tile and skated into the jukebox. His flashlight slipped out of his parka, rolled across the floor. The needle of the jukebox scratched noisily across a record, then caught. The jukebox blazed up, blaring out some old top 40 hit from years ago. The dump truck halted in front of the diner. Go! Shouted Wake. My flashlight! Barry ran. Breaker held the back door open for them, raced out after them. This way, she pointed. Another block over. The helicopter pad is on a big vacant lot. Wake heard the roaring first, then the truck screeched up. Fuck, hold on. Wake heard the roaring first, and then trucks screeched up at the end of the street, blocking them from going around. The trucks were so thick with shadows that the darkness leached out, made the night even blacker. Go through the general store, called Breaker, her voice half lost in the storm. Wake stepped through the broken door of the dark store, guarding the entrance while Barry and Breaker came in after. He could see Taken approaching from the tracks, hefting axes and tire irons. Breaker ran down the center aisle of the store, the counters heaped with model airplane kits and dolls, holiday lights and ornaments, racks of paperback books, and an enormous display of souvenir t-shirts. Wake stared at a portable TV set resting on the counter. The power was out in the store, but he turned it on anyway. The writer in the cabin show was on, Wake's doppelganger hunched over the typewriter, madly beating the keys. Bleh. Peh. The story I'm writing won't save Alice, said the voiceover. It wasn't Wake's voice, but it was close enough. It's a horror story, and it's going to kill her, and me, and everybody in this town. The darkness will be free, unstoppable. Hurry! Breaker stood at by the back door of the store. I've written myself into the story. I'm now the protagonist, said the writer. It's the only way to save Alice. I'll be bound by the events in the story just as much as anyone else. In a horror story, it can't be certain that the hero will succeed or even survive. He almost has to... Wake, move! Wake ran towards Breaker, looked around. Where's Barry? Isn't he with you? Wake heard rustling sounds from the dark store. Barry? I'm coming! Barry came over from the next aisle, his neck draped with something. It looked like a dozen Hawaiian leis. An enormous Taken stepped through the front door, charged at them, a pickaxe raised over his head. Wake fumbled for his flashlight. Breaker shot the Taken once, twice, 3 times, racking the shotgun to reload after each shot. It had no effect. Alan? She said softly. Wake's flashlight flickered, died. Give me your flashlight, he said to Breaker. I need the flashlight. Breaker shot the Taken again as it rushed them, but the shadows swallowed up the blast and left it unharmed. Wake grabbed the flashlight from Breaker as she raised the shotgun, but before he could turn it on, the area around the door turned bright red, green, and yellow and white lights flaring. Nailed in the light, the Taken started to retreat when Breaker fired again and again. The Taken blasted apart. Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! Shouted Barry, dancing around. As he twirled, the lights blazed around the store, all pretty colors bouncing off the security mirrors, holding the other Taken at bay in the doorway. Merry Christmas, one and all! Wake stared at Barry. He wasn't wearing strands of leis around his neck. He was wearing layers and layers of Christmas lights. Battery-powered, baby! Preened Barry, holding up the battery pack in his hand. He jabbed a finger at the Taken. Come on! Come here and sit on Santa's knee! Wake hustled him out the back door. The helicopter sat on the raised concrete pad across the street. Breaker got to the chopper first, slid into the cockpit while Wake and Barry took up positions around it. "Christmas tree lights?" said Wake. "I was feeling festive." "Yeah, me too," said Wake, watching as Taken approached him from surrounding buildings. "Any minute now I'm going to break out the confetti and party balloons." He shined his flashlight on the nearest Taken, but the beam was weak. He shot it anyway. No effect. "Hey, Sarah, anytime you want to start the engine would be fine with us." "Working on it," yelled Breaker. The engine turned over. Died. "Of course," said Barry, wreathed in flashing red and green lights. "The man with the hook approaches the couple parked in Lover's Lane, and the car won't start. The monster shambles toward the girl, trying to open the front door. She can't find the right key. It's a Halloween. It's a Halloween. It's a hallowed tradition. Man door, hand hook, car door." An axe whistled past his head. "Damn it, I hate tradition." He looked back at the helicopter, saw Breaker bent over the controls. "You want to put us out of our misery here, Sheriff?" The shadows roared over the town, tearing branches off the trees with the raw power of its passing. The Taken were closer, their guttural voices incoherent and menacing. A Taken in a yellow hard hat beat a sledgehammer against the street, a mindless drumming that tore up chunks of the asphalt as he lumbered forward. The engine turned over, started, died. "Sarah!" The engine caught, the blades of the helicopter turning slowly, then faster and faster as Breaker throttled the engine. "Get in," Wake said to Barry, keeping the flashlight on the Taken, slowing them down. "You get in," said Barry, then thought better of it as he... Well, hold on. Then thought better of it as a thrown lug wrench grazed his shoulder and shattered one of the bulbs. He ran under the whirling blades and dived into the cockpit of the helicopter. Breaker turned on the searchlights of the helicopter, the intensity of the beam alone disintegrating the sledgehammer Taken. Wake climbed into the chopper, holding on tight as Breaker rapidly lifted off, the helicopter banking for a moment, narrowly missing a power line before Breaker righted it. Barry's flashing lights reflected off the plastic canopy of the cockpit. Wake reached over and switched them off. "Hey!" Breaker flew over the town, lights on, saw glass glittering in the streets from 100 broken windows, crashed cars burned at the intersections, oily black smoke joining with the darkness. "You need to do something about this, Alan. You need to do whatever you can." Wake turned away from the wreckage below, kept his eyes on the fucking goddamn. Wake turned away from the wreckage below, kept his eyes on abandoned power... It just says kept his eyes on abandoned power plant in the distance. And I think that's what's fucking me up, because like part of me is just like, no, you need to read it right. No, you need to read it. You need to read it how it's written on the page. No, you need to read it with proper fucking grammar and word usage. Kept his eyes on the abandoned power plant in the distance. It seemed to glow in the night, light pouring from every window. "Just get me to Weaver. I'll take it from there." Mott had checked off all of Stucky's rental cabins. There had been no sign of the Wakes. It was dark where he'd found their car parked at the end of the road by Cauldron Lake. It made no sense. They must have taken a wrong turn, but there was no sign of them, and the car had been there for hours already. Frustrated, Mott stood on the rotten ruin of the footbridge that had once led to Diver's Isle, before it sank beneath the waves years ago. Hartman wouldn't be happy. Okay. So again, book taking obviously some creative liberties with the events of the game, but mostly to the benefit of its own, like, pacing, I guess. So here, of course, we've got the whole thing with Barry, Sarah, and Alan going through Bright Falls to get to the helicopter pad. Now, among other things, to start with, the manuscript page at the end of the last chapter was different from how that particular manuscript page reads in the book, because the event that it describes, or excuse me, how it reads in the game, the event it describes in the game is when the helicopter crashes with Sarah and Barry in it. Right? But in the book, because they've moved around events and changed how certain things play out, they have to update this page, otherwise it's going to be inaccurate. So now Alan is present for this particular manuscript page. In the game, you get separated from Barry. You have to go with Sarah to reach the town hall in order to get to the keys for the chopper. But in the book, Sarah, Barry, and Alan stick with each other the whole time. Now, earlier in the book, we had Alan mention the page to Barry about like him ending up inside the Bright Falls General Store. As such, they do end up getting to the Bright Falls General Store. But all of them go in, not just Barry, who would have been split from the rest of the group at that point. Now, it's possible that this may have been another thing from like an earlier version of the game, because there is a interior modeled for the Bright Falls General Store, which is seen in the DLC. I think the first DLC, in fact. The Signal, I think is what it's called, if I remember correctly. It's been a hot minute since I've played those, so I don't know for sure. Regardless, they all end up there, and that's where Barry gets his like string of Christmas lights. Now, an interesting thing that comes up here is Frank Breaker. Now, Frank Breaker is the previous sheriff of the town and Sarah's dad. And he is the first person that is contacted with the Night Springs code word, which Barry's all like, oh, is this a secret society? It's not quite so, like... How to put it? It's not necessarily quite so, like, clandestine, right? The way that Sarah explains it in the game is that, and she may explain it in the book, I don't know, it might be in a future chapter, but we're not going to get there today. The way that it's explained in the game is that sometimes shit in Bright Falls gets weird, and if shit gets weird enough that people need to be told, hey, there's some weird shit going on, then there's a bunch of people in town that Sarah calls and says Night Springs, just as like a quick, hey, you need to be aware of this. Now, the way that they've written about Frank Breaker chastising a young Sarah Breaker for making fun of Cynthia Weaver is interesting with some of the updates that we have to the overall, like, nature of the narrative. Because as we know now, Frank Breaker is a former agent for the Federal Bureau of Control, as established in Control, and also technically in the remaster of Alan Wake, where you can find a letter from the FBC in Sarah's office the first time you go there, addressed to Frank Breaker. And as we now know, Frank being contacted with the secret code word Night Springs prompts him to reach out to his old contacts at the Federal Bureau of Control and say, hey, weird shit is going down in Bright Falls. You guys need to fucking get out here. And they do. According to the events of Control, they do get the fuck out there, and they do investigate to see what's going on. And they open up, like, investigations and stuff like that. You can find, like, a bunch of Alan Wake items in in locations and control and a bunch of information as to exactly what happened following the events of Alan Wake 1, especially in the AWE DLC. Now, the intention seems to have always been that Frank Breaker was going to have some kind of knowledge as to what the fuck is going on. Exactly how much knowledge he had is a little bit up in the air. Because, like, let's be real here, there's a lot of people in Bright Falls that seem to have some kind of idea of what the fuck is happening. Obviously, the Andersons, because they dealt with it. Dr. Hartman, because he was the assistant to Thomas Zane when all that shit happened. Cynthia Weaver, because she was touched by the darkness as part of everything going on with Thomas Zane. That sort of thing. So it is not entirely out of the question that Frank Breaker may have some idea of what the hell is going on. And the initial intention may have just been that, like, he was just going to be a guy in the know. But we now know that he is, of course, a former agent for the Federal Bureau of Control, established as of that titular game. Which I think is fucking fantastic, honestly. Like, I love that. I love that for him. Now, the journey to get to the helicopter is not nearly as fraught with peril as it is in the game. They have to deal with a lot of shit. I love the roving gangs of Taken driving up and down the street in a garbage truck. That's great. But it's not quite like, they don't have to, like, trek up, like, hills upon hills upon hills. They don't have to worry about going through the crypt of the fucking church. They don't have to worry about, like, getting separated from Barry. The church is in the game is one of those moments where it seems like the people of the town know a little bit more than they seem to be letting on about, like, what's going on, where it's just like, oh yeah, you know, the night before Deerfest, we just keep all of the candles inside the church lit. It's just like, that's awfully convenient considering that we had to go through the church. So, like, that's what I'm talking about with regards to, like, Frank Breaker. Like, it's entirely possible that in a version of the story where control as a narrative, as a world building exercise to the Alan Wake series didn't exist, Frank Breaker is just a guy who has secret knowledge. And thus is just like, hey, don't make fun of Cynthia Weaver. She knows some shit. Whereas now that like Control is a part of the Alan Wake narrative, it reads now more like, hey, don't make fun of Cynthia Weaver. We're kind of keeping an eye on her because she actually went through some shit and knows a lot more than she's letting on. Not even that she knows more than she's letting on. She lets on just as much as she knows. It's just people think she's crazy for it, you know? That's going to be where we're going to stop for the day. I am excited to finish this up. We only have 3 more chapters, and then the epilogue. The entire final episode of Alan Wake is covered by one chapter in this book, which I think is very funny. Like, they just cut out so much fucking chaff. It's ridiculous. I want to thank everybody for coming by the stream. I hope you all had a good time. I know I did. If you enjoyed the stream, you can subscribe here on Twitch. We have special emotes for subscribers. You can also follow me on Twitter and Tumblr at AcidXShark. That's AcidXShark, where I post all the streams after as they happen. You can also follow me on YouTube at AcidXShark, where I post all the streams after they happen. I am working on putting together an edited version of the Hyrule Warriors stream. That's going to go up before either of the streams for this book club or tonight's Plague Tale stream. I couldn't get it rendered last night because in the middle of rendering, my power went out again. So that kind of sucked. And I thought, I don't want to risk like power going out again while I'm trying to get this rendered. So I figured I'd wait until tonight. Hopefully it doesn't start storming again. Art for the stream. Thumbnail, or PNG Tuber was done by Audrey and B of Team Capel. You can find on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube at Team Capel. That's TEAMCATPLE. If you want a commission from them, they do take commissions. You should commission them. They have a commission form on their card for commissions. Don't email them. They'll email you. If you must DM them, please don't be weird. Please don't be weird to my friends. What else? The chalkboard background was done by my lovely wife, Natalie, who you can find on Twitter at GhostyNaps. It's GHOSTIENAPS. We are still currently taking donations to help with bills and medical expenses after her prolonged hospital stay. So if you can help us out by donating and helping us, like, you know, keep our internet going, keep our power going, keep a roof over our head, we would really appreciate it. Let me think. What else? Upcoming streams. Tonight, in a couple of hours, I will be back and streaming A Plague Tale Requiem. We will be finishing the game tonight. I don't know how long it's going to take us to finish the game. I'm hoping it's my standard, like... Oh? Calm down there. Calm down there, video feed. I'm hoping it's my standard 2.5 to 3 hour runtime, but in the event that it isn't, and we finish it sooner than that, we might get started on Gollum? I don't know. Gollum's going to be the next thing after Plague Tale is done. That's the plan. So if we don't start it tonight, we'll start it next week. Tomorrow is going to be another 2 streams. In the afternoon is going to be The Sinking City with featuring friend of the stream and roommate JB. And then in the evening, it's going to be The Missing, JJ Macfield and the Island of Memories. Probably one of my absolute favorite sweary games, and I'm excited to show it off. Saturday is going to be more Fatal Frame, Made in Black Water. Next week, Wednesday, more Hyrule Warriors. We'll be continuing the sort of like bad guy storyline, and hopefully I don't completely fuck things up. And then next Thursday, we will be finishing the Alan Wake novelization in the afternoon. And once we finish the Alan Wake novelization, we will be moving on to the Alan Wake Files, which should be fun. Like I said, the Alan Wake Files has a lot of like really neat, like in-universe texts, like short stories that Alan wrote, notes from certain characters. It's basically like a compilation of like one dude's investigation in universe, a character that we actually meet really early on in the game. But that is all planned for, you know, after we finish this book. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. And I will see you next time on the Sharkstream later tonight. Same Shark time, same Shark channel. Take care, everybody.